No mai haere mai. Welcome to this workshop this morning on the 14th of November about the community halls. I'd just like to remind everybody that this is being live streamed for our community, and I'll just ask that you please turn your cell phones off. We're here today to talk about the community halls. There are 10 across the district, and this piece of work has been ongoing probably for the last year or so. The Rural Community Board has particular interest in this, and as part of their priority setting right at the beginning of their term, they identified the key things that they wanted to focus on. The rural community infrastructure, community safety, connection and communication, and community halls were the key priorities that they identified, and so they asked and advocated very strongly for a review of the condition of the halls. And this piece of work has flowed on from that, and Sam and her team have been really busy. Today's session is to ask questions and get feedback on the information that's going to be presented to you today to understand the condition of the halls. It's also to get an understanding that the community halls are part of a larger portfolio of property as well. So we have about $500 million worth of property assets across the district, and the community halls are part of that. I will just introduce who's in front of us today that's going to present. We've got Samantha Riley. She's the Manager of Property and Legal for the Rotorua Lakes team. We've got Kellyanne Panapa. Hi, Kellyanne. She's the Director from Thriving Communities, and Stavros Michael's the GM for Infrastructure. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to the team to present to us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Morena Tatikato. We will go through a brief presentation which comprises 2 or 3 main parts. One is general information about our community halls, so serve our various communities. Then we've got some technical elements and financial elements, as best we know them at this point in time, but also Kellyanne will talk in her capacity through the community engagement about her views and thoughts and feedback from various communities, how important or how they view those halls. And then obviously we can take any questions elected members may have as part of this workshop. Start with as the chair noted, the community halls is one of the many clusters of property and facilities the council owns and operates, and we will gradually over the coming months introduce those clusters through workshops to can inform elected members' future approach and perceptions and views about the management of those facilities. For today, the purpose of the workshop is really to inform elected members on the function of the community halls facilities, community views, any background they've got available to us, the utilization rates, the structural condition of those assets and financial matters, and obviously to identify any issues and seek elected members' feedback that will inform our future approach in long-term planning for these facilities. In brief, we have about 10 community halls, or about 10 community halls spread across the district, with a nominal replacement value of between $10 and $13 million. Significant level of considerations that inform our thought process would be, what is the council's future role in those community halls? Quite important to know that most of these halls were built and vested by the communities and vested back to council. So they were built by funds through fundraising, donations, land donations. Some of them were built on council land and so on. But those communities built those halls over a long period of time, and the council took over stewardship and responsibility for ongoing operations and maintenance. Significant consideration is that what is the current status of the facilities condition? What we currently invest in those facilities. Also, to the best of our knowledge, what is the utilization of these halls, and I will identify later some caveats about that, because have some information, but we're not entirely sure whether that information is accurate. And obviously, a key question is that, do we need 10? Or does the community need 10 community halls, or they need more or need less? And these are key considerations informing the discussions we're going to have. This is just a broad picture of those community halls. They have a range of configurations and locations, and in some key metrics, for your information, is that most all these halls were built between 1945 and 1980. They've got an age between 45 and 75 years old. The average size of the building, it's between 250 and 600 square meters. They're serving a community of total residents about 9,000 people. So on average, you can say each hall serves about 900 residents. I know it's across average, but that's the number we have. We have more detailed information for each of these halls. It identifies the main construction type, of the halls: timber frames, colored steels, and cladding. And obviously, we have information about the proximity of each hall to other community facilities, such as schools, sports clubs, and whether those facilities are in a practical and reasonable proximity to what the community considers to be viable and convenient distance for them to use them effectively. Right. Connie, can we move to the next one, please? Now, the current operational management of these halls is guided by a set of guidelines, and the management of bookings and the use is done by hall committees. Not all of the halls have committees. They do report quarterly to the council. The committees receive and deposit revenue from bookings into Rotorua Lakes Council's accounts. They also report noted maintenance issues via our Custom Solutions Center, and the people who are using the halls got a responsibility to clean after the use, remove, clean, and the council provides consumables like cleaning consumables and toilet papers and things like that. In terms of maintaining and repairing those halls, we have a panel of preferred building suppliers or maintenance suppliers, and we're engaging them to do various facilities compliance checks in terms of inspections to meet statutory requirements, but also to do the required building maintenance and the necessary renewals. Some graphs about the utilization. You would see that the utilization does not appear to be very high. The highest use per year relates to the Lake Okareka Community Hall, but that is because the hall operates 5 days a week as a childcare center, preschool, childcare center. Nakuru had a significant change in bookings, when they had a agent change in 2023, and the Rerivakaito Sports Hall do not provide usage figures as they don't have a committee, so they're not included in this at this point in time. Now, I want to sort of note that this is information we have. It does not mean it's an accurate information. So we really need to continue to improve that how we gather that information, because obviously utilization and demand will inform our future approach towards those facilities. But nevertheless, this is what we've got at the moment, and on the face of that, one would make a judgment call sometimes that where utilization is low, but the question is that how accurate it is, it remains to be clearly crystallized. Again, last year, in the last 12 months, as the Chair, Councillor Barker noted, we have undertaken some structural inspections and condition assessments of these facilities, because it is our intention to build a long-term facilities management plan. And I would like to note, although there are some red areas there, I would like to note that this does not denote an immediate threat. Rather, the red areas identify elements in the structures that are critical component to the facility and we give them priority for action. Floor joists, barriers, cladding, waterproofing, and so on. These are important elements to maintain the functionality and the buildings in stable condition. And on the basis of those critical priorities, we are now building an action plan to work through them. Some general notes for the facilities condition. Under the brands, the building research of New Zealand data. The economic life of on average buildings about 75 years. So in general terms, the design life of a building, it needs to be gradually considered, and an option needs to be developed whether you renew the building at the end of its economic life, you upgrade it or replace it. There are two distinct components of the building. You've got the structural elements, the frames, the foundations of the building, the roof of the buildings. Also, internally, you've got components like electrical, plumbing, carpets, painting, furniture, into the buildings and so on. So obviously, our future asset management plan needs to make a distinction between the structural element of the facility and the other components that have got shorter life expectancies. Maintenance, renewal, and replacement plans have obviously different drivers for structural and component elements. Structural elements usually relate to the building's warrant of fitness and the safety of the people who are using it, while the other elements within the building obviously relates to the comfort and the convenience and the amenity that the building provides for those who are using it. But again, the interventions for that will vary depending on the degree of or the type of those structures. Just briefly, at a very high level, financial level, Council's long-term plan, operational maintenance budgets, for utilities and maintenance facilities, about $300,000 over 3 years. That's about $100,000 a year. That translates about $10,000 a year. $10,000 a year for each facility for maintenance. We also have an insurance component of about $60,000. So the total operational budget is about $355,000 over 3 years. Translates to about $120,000 a year. Those facilities generate a small income for those people who hire them. It's about, for the period of 3 years, about $46,000. Capital expenditure comprised mainly of renewals, and the average accrued renewal or accumulated renewal or based on depreciation every year is about $200,000 a year. In the last 2-3 years, we have not spent as much as has been allocated for renewals, and the reason for that, we did not have the condition assessment to target or interventions on those halls. There is an issue with the budgets, with the capital budget of the renewals, because in terms of renewals, when you look into a community hall that has got an average replacement value of just over $1 million, say, if you have a small portion of renewals allocated to that, it needs to be used within a given financial year. If it's not used, then cannot carry it forward. So we need to consider what we do to accumulate reserves to allow a full refurbishment or replacement facility by actually accumulating that, those depreciation levels. Now, the total spend, obviously, in terms of renewals, is influenced by the condition assessments we have undertaken or will continue to undertake, and obviously, an assessment of the forward planning of our property team, and that is the purpose of this workshop, to get some feedback themselves. I think key elements for the financial component is that historically the operations and maintenance investment is fairly low compared to the value of the assets. The renewal component, again, is got a limitation because it's restricted to a definite fiscal period. Then we need to think how do we enable an appropriate accumulation of funds for major refurbishment or replacement in due course. Community insights, I've got some highlights there, but I will ask Kellyanne, who's been involved with the communities, and I think we can use Mamaku as a pilot case at the moment. Kellyanne has been involved with the community, and she's got some very good insights on how the community see those halls, how they value them, how important they are for their communities. Now let Kellyanne to talk about that, and then we'll take it from there. Kellyanne?
Morena. Morena, everyone. So, as you know, earlier, at the end of 2023, the Mamaku Community Hall was closed, and then I think in January the decision was made that it was closed indefinitely due to significant structural issues. That prompted a response from the Mamaku community, and as a result, myself and some of my team went in to engage with the community to understand what the pain points have been for them, and try and seek to understand what it is exactly they saw the issues as being, and whether or not there was some learnings we could take from that, either to offer ways forward for them, but also to understand what implications this learning might have for future realities where similar decisions might need to be made. So some of the, it was interesting. The intent was that we would invite one or two key members of the community just to have a bit of a recce conversation with them and just say, look, where do we begin to engage with the community, and how do we, how best to structure that? We invited 2 people in, and we ended up with 10 community members come into council and come and have a chat with us. So as a result, it ended up being a much bigger discussion than we anticipated, but felt really privileged by the end of it to be able to sit with those community members and hear their frustrations and hear about how some of the solutions that that were coming out of their minds around a way forward. Probably it was I think more than 2 hours of discussion, so there was a lot of kind of insight, a lot of kōrero and a lot of information that they shared with us. Some of the pain points are historic, that they had really strong sentiments around feeling like council, they misunderstood, and that probably Rotorua as a district had forgotten them and forgotten the large contribution that town, that they feel like that they have made as a rural community to the establishment of Rotorua as well. Some of their contextual conditions around being traditionally a mill, they thought they were quite different even to other rural communities in the district, being established as a mill community. They were quite different from the other rural communities which were largely farming, and that the mill had closed down. Since the mill had closed down, there was really a lack, and there aren't any other facilities in their proximity, like other communities might have, a marae or a sports club or something like that, where they, as an alternative community gathering place and social place. So those were some of the extenuating circumstances they thought that they had as a community. There was really, and I think many of you will have heard this before when they've come in, there was really strong sentiment around the fact that it was a memorial hall, and actually in our discussion, one member in particular started to well up when he was talking about the prospect of this memorial hall, which was established to commemorate those who had fallen in battle, and that many of the soldiers that were fallen in battle, nobody knew where they were, and that this was the hall was a constant reminder to their community that that those soldiers had fallen for the greater good, and that and they kind of talked about how, you know, we've got photos on our walls, we've got all these things, and so every time there's an event here, we're always remembering them. So that was a really salient kind of sentiment from the community there. I summarised 4 main ideas, or 4 main kind of key points that came out of the discussion that I believe are useful as points around impact on community, but also as decision makers, how we might be thinking about what decisions we need to do and how we might start to mitigate impact depending on the decision, if that makes sense. So the 4 kind of key areas, the first one was, obviously they really value their hall and they believe they need their hall and they want to keep their hall, and they're prepared to work with us, work with council to find a way forward. So I suppose the key learning around that was how might we be able to take the community on the journey, explore the challenges that obviously you're all getting to explore today, and understand, well, what are the possible solutions that we could create with those communities, should it be deemed that they might be something worth saving. The second point was, we already feel underserved by council, and this is a further insult. So there's a fair bit of work, I think, around obviously those are perceptions, and some of the things that I think that they raised, in that you know, there's question about how much of that is genuine concern or a genuine issue or perception, but I think there's probably some work we can do around how we tell the story about the contribution that council is making in those communities. So they don't necessarily feel like this is something that we're stripping away, if that's the outcome. And taking them on the journey, obviously, and having really good communication loops with them is another key point. Another one of these sentiments was, council have not upheld their own obligations to adequately maintain the facility. We shouldn't have to pay the consequences. So they talked about these perceptions that we hadn't done our bit around that. And so I believe that there's a piece of work around just how we obviously can bring them along on the process, so we have access to information and understanding about how we arrived at a decision. And there might be a really strong logical process to that, but they're not necessarily part of that, and they don't necessarily understand how we arrive at those decisions, and so they have perceptions around what's informed those decisions. We can do that. I think we can do some work around taking them on that journey a bit further. And then we feel that the fourth one was really about they feeling blindsided by the decision. And because council has not involved them in the process, we don't understand why solutions we offer aren't viable. So, you know, and I think that the theme is similar, part of the things that we can do. And I guess the point around this is really around, if we're starting to make decisions about the future of all the community halls, there's another piece around how we work alongside the communities and bring them on the journey. And just making sure that the fallout or the impact is mitigated to the best of our ability.
Thank you, Kellyanne. I think that was a good, articulation of feedback from the community, and we did come in. Okay. Now, noting that the information we've got in front of us is that the communities that are served by these halls are valuing those halls. It's not just, it appears to me, on the basis of the property itself or the facility itself. It's just that it appears to be viewed, those halls appear to be viewed as as a part of the identity of each community. That's where they get together. That's how they organize their functions. It's a gathering place. And I think that's the information we have from Kellyanne and the feedback we had so far. And obviously, they do want to be part of any future decisions about how those things be managed. So based on those the assumptions that we have 10 halls at the moment, we've got two key considerations. One is to retain the existing facilities as they are, or to replace existing facilities. On both of these considerations, obviously some criteria need to apply to them. To retain a facility, it needs to be maintained safe, it needs to be maintained structurally compliant, and it needs to be accessible to the community. And also some key consideration that was floated from time to time is that could that facility be leased to the community at a nominal value and then operated by the community? It's a model that perhaps can be explored later on. If the facility has reached the end of its economic life and needs to be replaced, it will be replaced with what? It needs to be fit for the intended purpose. It needs to consider other opportunities in the community to replace the physical building. Might be school halls, might be other facilities that the council wants to invest into, that make economic sense, to do so. The bottom line is that what is the purpose of a community hall rather than building itself. So the set of criteria we are outlining there is that key facilities management considerations. That what size a community hall needs to service. If you have 50 people, it's a different hall from 1,000 people, obviously. Other community facilities in the proximity, of the hall or in close accessibility by the community, that would make a good cost-benefit analysis to invest into instead of replacing, fully replace a facility of that nature. What is the current and anticipated utilization of the community hall? If we think, for example, at the moment the hall will go reliable and credible information is only being used for 100 hours a year, is it worth spending $1 million to replace that facility? These are key fundamental questions that need to be questioned. And obviously the assets have a current age life between 45 and 75 years as they are at the moment, or even older than that. Their asset condition to some degree will dictate whether it's worth repairing, upgrading, or demolishing, rebuilding, replacing. So these are fundamental questions, but the important thing is that we have at the moment 10 halls. They do need to be maintained safe and accessible, and until those long-term decisions are made, then you have to have responsibility to make sure we provide, for the safe keeping of those facilities. So the key points I wanted to leave our presentation with is that, as you already aware, in our other infrastructure assets, our water services, our road services, we've got an infrastructure strategy that's got a 30-year horizon. It is our intention over the next few months to build a long-term facility strategy like our infrastructure strategy. That's a very valuable approach, I believe, for us as officers, so we can gain some strategic objectives and we can create some principles and create some criticality interventions, so it will inform our future approach to not just the community halls, but all our clusters of other facilities we've got. For the community halls, some independent assessments were carried out in the last 12 months, which identified some structural issues that need to be addressed, and we are in the process at the moment to address the Mamaku and the Riparo halls, but these are interim interventions to buy us a few more years until we make some long-term decisions. The strategic assessment we intend to progress in the form of, let's say, an infrastructure and facilities and assets strategy. It will form the long-term position and investment required for this level of service that you propose to have for those communities. and obviously that will inform the long-term plan of the council, and obviously key questions whether we retain something by actually investing to upgrade it or to replace the facility with, and what options are available for that purpose. As I said, there are 10 community halls, and the question would be, do we need 10 community halls in total? Do we need 8? Do we need 5? Do we need 6? But these are engagement issues, a community consultation that needs to be undertaken. I assume that between now and the next LTP, we need to have this kind of conversation, honest conversation with the communities to identify their views and possible options. What is not negotiable is that if we operate these 10 halls, they need to be structurally safe for use. We cannot have people using those halls if we know that we've got structural assessments, condition assessments that indicate that are unsafe to be used. So we have a duty of care to make sure that take place. We will make sure that they are compliant with the relevant regulations, and we will do so on the basis of medium-term objectives until we have a long-term assessment, strategic assessment for all the assets and all the facilities, so it can inform a future approach on totality, but also on individual community-by-community basis. So that's all we have today, and again, I'm more than happy to take any questions, have a conversation, and obviously that will be very helpful for us to have a feedback so we can start building our future strategy in this particular cluster of assets, but also for other assets in the future too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve, Rosine, Kelly, Anne and Samantha very much for the report. I'll just throw it over to councillors for questions to start with. Councillor Patterson, and Mayor Tapsell, and then Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report. Very interesting topic. Just a couple of questions. I looked at the figures regarding the OPEX. 355k over 3 years is in the budget. 14% of that seems to be committed to insurance. Has there been any consideration on how we could potentially reduce that, or has that been considered by Audit and Risk as part of our overall look at our insurance and what we're prepared to insure and what we're not?
Not at this point in time, Councillor Patterson, but it's a good point. We need to look into it.
Just have a few more, if that's all right, Madam Chair. Kaingaroa, does that have a hall?
It just recently had the new medical centre open up, which does have a facility for community use, only recently.
Right, yes. I thought that might have been the case. I wasn't sure if we're still responsible for that.
Is it Kaingaroa Village?
Yes.
No, we don't look after that.
Okay, thank you. Do the 10 halls that you've got listed, I noticed there was 2 in Rera Whakaitu. Why is that?
Yeah, the answer to that, I'm not sure.
2 different sets of community groups built halls in different eras, and as Stavros said earlier, then they were vested to council in different eras as well as communities could no longer look after them.
Thank you for clarifying that. And do we have an idea of a ratio of marae versus community halls? Like, do we have a plan that shows this place has a marae and a hall, or this place doesn't? Do we have that kind of information?
No, I don't think we have. I mean, we could do that as a geospatial assessment and all that. How the marae are owned by the hapu. Those community halls are under our stewardship, and perhaps we can explore that possibility. As I said earlier, when we look into the option of replace, does not necessarily mean replace a whole with a whole. It might be an option to invest into a marae, facility. So that's what I'm saying, that it might be, obviously with agreement of the relevant hapu cannot impose on people anything that they don't want to do that. But these are good options to explore.
And also the civil defence operations, are they all incorporated into those community halls?
Yeah, civil defence, these community halls are very good positions or locations to act as what we call welfare centres. And obviously the availability of these halls gives the community a point where they can receive welfare, touch wood, in case of an emergency.
Thank you. My last one was just for you, Kellyanne, your interaction with the Mamaku residents. You used the word perception quite a bit. So what do you think has fed their perception that they believe that this is a symbol of what we should be doing for their community, or that's all we do for their community? If we take that away, what have they got? Where do you think that's come from?
Just trying to, is it we're the perception that, I'm just
Yes.
sorry, could I clarify the question?
So basically, you mentioned that they have this perception that the community hall is one of the few things in their minds that we do as a council for their community. So where do you think that's come from?
Without asking that question directly of the community, I'm reluctant to sort of make assertions about where that sentiment comes from. There is a perception that I suppose the perception is that the Mamaku community don't necessarily see the benefits of their rates to the same extent that they pay rates. It's been a bit difficult. I've sort of done some exploring into that, and it's been a bit difficult to say for sure, but when I've spoken to various departments, just anecdotally, the investment that council makes into the community is would be in excess of the rates that they return. I guess the thing that we could address is how we daylight, or how we communicate the investment back. If that's answering your question.
It's a difficult question to answer, really,
It
without
is,
actually having the community here to answer for
Yes,
themselves.
well, may I suggest then perhaps that before we go down this path, we might want to do some sort of direct consultation with each community to say, do you value this or not? Just a thought.
Yeah, nice point.
Thank you. Mayor Tapsell.
Thank you very much. Was it correct, I think you mentioned it was $10 to $13 million in replacement for all of the community halls? Yeah, that's not insignificant. That's over $1 million each, although we have seen that some are in very different condition. Unfortunately, some are in very good condition. But I do just have a question regarding the Mamaku and Rotorua halls. So obviously those are were highlighted as in the worst condition, but you mentioned there's interim interventions going on and those are progressing. So I know that that will be of great interest to the community. Are you aware of when that work may be completed, and does that fall into existing budgets that we have, or will it require a council decision either in this financial year or the annual plan to help to pay for those repairs?
So thank you, Your Worship. Mamaku is with now negotiating or finalising a time frame for the interventions with the builder. Do you have any dates from here at the moment? And but we soon we identify the works that need to be done to identify those critical elements, and should be done over the next 2-3 months, hopefully. The Riparo also got some roofing replacements or improvements to be done, and again, we aim to finish this before April, the Anzac, as a commemoration in the Anzac period, in April next year. Budgetary-wise, we're going to use this year's allocation of renewal components, to factor it in. As I said earlier, we are trying to address those critical components to give us some extension of critical components, of life in these facilities, because we need to have a longer-term view. But the works will happen over the next few months in those facilities. The works will be funded by existing budgets. I just wanted to emphasize these are what we call interim interventions. The longer-term strategic decisions has to be done as part and parcel of your long-term plan. Thank you.
Thank you. And you have also mentioned that we have $500 million worth of assets for our community. So while it is $10 million, it is still only part of the many community assets that we need to maintain. So no doubt part of the decision making will be on how we prioritise spending either for community halls or others. My last question was, many of these community halls, as you've mentioned, well, they were built by the community, and over time they've come into council so that we can maintain them and ensure that they are still available for use for the community. Would any future decisions look at returning these to community ownership?
That's, yes, I think you would recall one of our power presentations when we're looking into future options is whether we use the word lease, or return back to the community. Could be lease for a nominal, nothing. If you so wish it, so the communities can operate them. So these are options that we need to explore. If facility needs to be kept, the community wants to be kept, would they like the council to continue to own and operate them, or would they like, or would themselves take it over and manage it themselves? These are options that we're exploring.
Thank you. And I'd just like to also suggest that perhaps in those options, if the community are not able to take it on as part of a community hall, association, etc., that potentially we could also look at introducing a targeted rate, like we have a lakes enhancement rate, or potentially ring fencing rates from rural areas to upgrade them. I'm just mindful these public facilities are used specifically by those communities, and many of our rural communities do believe that they pay a large amount of rates, but unless their rural roads, which are also very expensive, are replaced, they do not always see the investment within the area that they live. So just some potential to consider in future how we manage this financially. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mutepsil. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the Chair. Thank you, Stavros, Sam, Kellyanne. Could I ask, please, could we go back to the slide that had all the colours, the grading of the maintenance for the halls?
Vision assessment.
Yes, please.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Pardon.
Yep, that'll be fine. That's good for a starter. So could I just ask for clarification through the Chair, please? So when the first announcement around, I think, the closure of the Mamaku Hall was announced, I think, Madam Chair, at a rural board meeting?
Correct, yes.
Thank you. At that meeting, it was announced that there would be a significant amount of work needed across all halls, and that would be presented sometime probably in December. Is this that meeting, or is there still further meetings to come to council on these matters? And I appreciate, Stavros, you weren't involved in this area at that time, but Sam might recall. Is this the final meeting about it, or will there be a meeting to a formal council meeting about money requested, or what the state of the halls, or your work program?
Well, I think from my perspective, Councillor O'Brien, I wanted to see the structure, the assessment done, highlight the critical components, ask myself the question, do I have enough funding at this point in time to intervene and deal with this? And I think I do, for those critical areas. I'm presenting, we have this workshop today to highlight that longer term decisions has to be made about the replacement value and how many of these need to be done. So I would expect that those decisions to be made as part and parcel of your long-term planning process in the next, in the next cycle. I think we've got enough funding at the moment to address the critical components that's been identified, because I want to ensure that they're safe to be used. But the decision about longer-term investment and major investment, I believe that should come to council at the next long-term plan assessment.
Thank you. So from what your answer that you've just given me, just so I'm clear, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, you're confident that you have the funding available between now and our next LTP deliberations. There should be no more hall closures because of significant issues.
I'm comfortable that we've got enough renewal funding. I highlighted that we've got an operational maintenance budget that it seems to be pretty challenging. $10,000 a year for each hall, the maintenance budget. The renewal component is fine, but that's part of your annual plan and considerations you may have to.
Okay, so if I take it that this is the meeting for us to air our
But this is a feedback for you.
great.
Okay?
Oh, I've got feedback for you. So let me ask you, before we move forward, can we look at how we got here? It seems to be a repetitive refrain that we use a lot around in this building. So the Rotorua roof. Could you tell me how long ago, roughly, sorry, I'm trying to think, was it roughly about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, repairs were done?
Do you know that?
I think it was 6 or 7 years ago from memory.
6 or 7, thank you. So what's the reason that we're going back and the roof needs redoing? What's the major problem? Is it materials or workmanship? What's the...
There's a failure in the flashings at Rotorua that has allowed water egress and formed mould within inside Rotorua. So those need to be addressed.
Right, so that hall is currently closed because of that issue, is that correct?
Correct.
Right. So can I ask, please, since we haven't got any workings on this, how did we get to that point? How was a major issue, such as the roof, constructed in such a way that it wasn't picked up, that clearly either the work or the materials weren't appropriate? These buildings, as you say, 75-year lifespan approximately, tend to be in very hot areas in summer. Our rural areas in winter don't tend to be particularly warm. So they're going to be, the materials and all that need to be very robust and resilient in these sort of weather conditions. How was a roof work done where this sort of work wasn't identified?
As Stavros mentioned, operationally, there's very limited budgets with the community halls. That also is reflective of the resourcing to this space. There is no dedicated resource within council at this stage for community halls to look after them as facilities. So as far as I'm aware, a lot of these works were done under general management and contractors were brought in to do the work with limited oversight or ability to have oversight directly on these things and a trust of being a preferred supplier to be carrying it out to the building code.
Okay. All right. I think I've made my point there. We'll leave that alone. Okay. Could I ask, because I know this will come up at some point with either the Rural Board or at next meetings about this. The $200,000 budget that used to be in the LTP, previous LTP, for hall maintenance, why was that not used? So people are asking us now, when we've closed their halls because of these issues, and they appreciate some of these are historical issues, so it's nothing against you guys, but they're saying, well, there was a budget there, why was it not used?
I'm not aware there were $200,000 budget for 10 halls.
I'm pretty sure we've covered that before, is that correct, Madam Chair?
I think there's, is it a CapEx?
Yeah,
CapEx.
sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think, as I said earlier, I have undertaken an assessment of the condition to lead the priorities we need to give to this halls, okay? For the critical components. I suppose your question, Councillor O'Brien, is that if there was money in the previous year, why was not used? Because I imagine that condition assessment of these facilities did not clarify what elements needed to be addressed at that point in time. And therefore, that's why I'm highlighting the issue that we need to put all these clusters of facilities into a proper level of management, such as an infrastructure strategy or a facility strategy that will identify the intervention levels and the intervention triggers. And yes, we do have some issues to address. But also I understand there were some expectations in the past that the various committees that were managing those halls would report effects in these halls, and they were not, but the system did not work as well as it should have worked.
So could I ask you on that, how would a hall committee identify if materials used in a roofing repair were not suitable until...
Can I just say something?
They would see, I assume they would see the symptoms of poor roofing. I imagine if the roofing is not performing as you...
Totally get that, but as a pool committee member, I'm only going to notice that when
that's a fair point.
that affects, correct?
That's a fair point. And you would notice, on my presentation, is that is an expectation that we need to improve the coordination between the committees, our regular inspections, and the community engagement as to how these facilities are used and how they're maintained. I accept it.
Thank you, and I might just see you would like to say something as well.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Look, totally all fair questions, Councillor O'Brien. I might just say that the purpose of this presentation is to really give us a snapshot in time. I understand your questioning as well. How did we get here? Just wanted to be fair. We haven't really prepared for an autopsy on each hall at this point. We wanted to bring this to you to give you a snapshot because you are entering a period where we have, as the rural board has and other rural communities have asked for this. So we wanted to give that information as soon as possible rather than waiting till we had an autopsy on how we got here on every single hall. Moving forward, as I have seen that we do need to have a very strategic view of all our assets, not just halls, and halls are one part of that. As Stavros said, that's one of the reasons we are signalling already that a much more strategic view of all our non-infrastructure assets will be a key theme of the next long-term plan. And in the meantime, we've got this 3 to 5 year horizon with which we're approaching halls, try and keep them, hold them so that the community have use of them, and signalling where we think there's the room in the budget to do that, in the budgets that you've already approved. So I guess I'd just say that totally valid questions. One of the reasons we're not quite able to answer exactly what went wrong on each of these is that we haven't really prepared for that at this point. We wanted to bring you the information as soon as we had it.
I thank you for your answer, and I appreciate what the purpose you would like this meeting to be. The purpose of what we are as councillors and who worship as the Mayor is when we go to address our rural meetings in the communities and they ask us these questions, we need to be, one, able to provide answers. And it's rather shocking to me that we're still not quite at that point where we can say on specific issues how things have got to this point. Two, is what's the next step forward, and do I have confidence in our process and our ability to deliver positive change, no matter what that change looks like. And at the moment, I'm on the fence on that. And that's not a good place as a councillor to be. So I'll leave that for you as the CE to work with your staff and feel how you could address that issues. Finally, Madam Chair, if I could just bring up, I took Councillor Patterson's question about Rotorua Lakes 2 halls. Is one in a more better state than the other? Is there are they both in a...
They both are in similar states. The reporting there shows for Rotorua Lakes Community Hall. The sports hall was done slightly later in the piece, but has very similar reporting. So
could I clarify, are we talking about, so when we're saying about addressing the issues in red there, if they were both roughly the same state, we're going to be repairing both of them?
I think we'd have to make a call on that for that 3 to 5 year time frame that Stavros is referring to, as to whether we would need to address both halls and looking at both of them being open, or if we could. So,
when will we make that decision? Who will make that decision, and when will it be made?
Well, I would imagine that, as I said earlier, if those 10 community halls would not be demobilized, we have a responsibility to keep them safe. In Rotorua, obviously, is a reason why there were 2 community halls. We identified some areas of work that need to be done. We will go back to the community and ask the question whether they need both of them to maintain accessible, functional, in a safe condition. If we identify through the community liaison that perhaps it's better to invest more in one facility than in both facilities. We'll come back to you because you will have to make a decision to close one down. And I don't want to make that decision at this point in time.
Well, no, but sorry, forgive me, but if you're asking for feedback, I mean, I'm not going to be thrilled about paying for 2 halls to be in the same amount of disrepair to be brought up to a standard if 2 halls aren't required.
That's a fair point.
Yeah, and
So I was hoping that at this meeting would be the one where you set this out for us to help.
Well, as I said, I will not make a recommendation at this point in time. We're just getting your feedback at the moment. Councillor O'Brien is to say, consider whether 2 halls are viable or not. That's what you're asking me to do.
Well, sorry, I would have thought that would be just, yeah. Yes, no. If you want me to put it in that way, yes. Okay. That would be good to know before.
We will consider that and advise councillors when we make that consideration and talk to the community about it.
Thank you. And finally, Madam Chair, could I just ask, years ago there was discussion, I think it was covered in the Daily Post or Matters, about the Broadlands Hall, separate to Rotorua, because Rotorua also acts as the public toilet stop for traffic on that way. So I think we need to remember that it's not just the hall, it's also a convenience for travellers. The Broadlands Hall being either gifted over to the school, because I think the school at that time was the major user of the hall. Is that something that is still on the board?
Well,
forgive me, I think it was quite some time ago that work was done.
Yeah, it's good feedback, and I believe that as part of the 2012 long-term plan, the council did a big piece of work with the community, consulting widely on all the halls, and it was a recommendation at that time that perhaps that hall could be vested into the school, but there was no progress made on that at that stage.
From 2012?
Yes, that was.
Well, I'm glad it was a priority issue for the council at that time. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Stavros.
Anyway. Thank you. Just quickly on this, well, before I move on to the next question, Stavros, all those critical areas on those across those halls need to be addressed in the next 2 to 5 years. Is that?
Yes.
And have you got comfort around the fact that we have enough budget to address those issues in the next 2 to 5 years, or do we need to be sending a signal?
Well, the critical components can be addressed. I think what I'm raising at this point in time is that at the maintenance area, the budget appears to be Spartan.
So the maintenance budgets are Spartan. Okay, thank you. Councillor Wang and then Councillor Brown. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. Thank you for the presentation. My first question is just around the financing for the halls. Are you aware of any of the halls that help contribute to the maintenance or renewals of their own hall? If it's their hall committee, if it's their own community that helps contribute towards their halls?
Not off my head, but I'm sure there are different kind of models, of the community's management of those halls. Probably from the information there, over the 3 years, the revenue generated by the utilization of those halls was only about $46,000 over the 3 years. So, what is that translate? About $15,000 a year. So obviously, the utilization and payments for that, it's really an insignificant amount towards what actually is needed, but I'm not aware of any other communities who have different kind of funding model for these halls, but we can investigate that.
Actually, I can add some context there just on one particular occasion. I do know that the Kaharoa Community Association are very proactive with maintaining their hall and also seeking alternative funding to purchase air conditioning units and that kind of thing. So they've done quite a lot of work as a community to improve the quality of their hall. Thank you.
Sorry, through you, Chair, that's what I just wanted to add as well. Lake Okarika is very much the same, being the daycare association. They take it upon themselves to do working bees, to keep on top of things and to contribute by adding other aspects outside of the building, such as shade sails and benches and fencing. So those two communities with the more green and yellow have greater working bee arrangements to take care themselves.
Thank you, Madam Chair. also aware that one of the Rerewhakaitu halls, being the sports hall, also collects revenue from the sale of grass to help fund some of the the maintenance of that sports centre. My other question is just around, it was kind of touched on by Councillor O'Brien, was just around the utilisation of the halls. So you have mentioned that the local Kareka Hall, as we know, is used by the preschool. The other halls, I know that like Broadlands, Ngākuru, Waikiri Valley, Rerewhakaitu, and possibly others as well, have been used by this local school. Is that utilisation reflected in the report? I know that that's received via the hall committees, but it doesn't seem, I guess, reflective in the way that, I guess, a school would be utilising it.
Actually, can you answer that question, Sue?
So it is all the figures that we receive from the hall committees, inclusive of any school usage. It's not excluding any of that, it's what they receive. And as you mentioned, many of the halls are utilised by the schools, but it is all inclusive of any hour that they report.
Thank you. And so I guess following on from that, is that an opportunity for us to discuss with the schools or the Ministry of Education to around the future of those halls, and are they a party that we are actively engaged in those conversations?
Well, I think, look, these are very good points, Councillor Wang. I think when I asked a question about the future strategic approach to these halls, the question is that does the Council continue to undertake these halls management on its own? Albeit of Councillor O'Brien questions, have we done a good job or not? I'll leave it at that. But if we have to look into the future, we have to ask a question, who do we collaborate or can collaborate with to make a better management decisions in this area? So that's why we need the time to ask these questions. But these are very good points. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wang. Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, fellas and girls, for the report. I think Councillor O'Brien sounding a bit harsh on the team. We all inherited a dog and we're just trying to fix it. So I think it's a bit harsh to be nailing these guys when some of the stuff happened 7 years ago. We've got a new CEO and Stavros has just inherited this mess. It's another one that we'll try and fix up. Anyway, my question is Tarawera Community Centre. What's the status of that? Is that council owned or is that separate? Do we know?
It is not council owned as a building. It's run and operated and owned by the community out there. Okay.
Maybe there's some lessons there on how they operate that as to how some of the other communities might operate theirs. I know Karaka is very proactive, as you've already ably stated. They look after it and spend money on it, so perhaps we could think about that. I guess and as part of the consultation or the consideration is how much land is associated with each of these, and can we slice off a little bit and generate some money to pay for stuff? You know, it's a pretty broad piece of work that you should be looking at. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Just one quick question from me around the utilisation graphs that you showed. I suspect, particularly looking at the fact that Broadlands Hall has generated no revenue at all, and yet it is used regularly by the school. Can you just clarify how the halls are booked and how the revenue is paid to council? Is the system such that it is totally transparent and foolproof, or do we need to do some work there? Because I suspect this doesn't actually reflect clearly the actual use. Would that be, you can answer that?
So under the guideline documents for the community halls, the committees are in charge of being a booking agent and the hierarchy of every hall. It is their duty to report that information back quarterly via emailing to the property team, and they too deposit either cash or by electronic transfer the proceeds related to those hires. In terms of managing it going forward, yes, I think there are opportunities to improve what is currently in place, and that should be something we also look at and consider.
So these people are volunteers?
Yep.
And there's, they're handling cash in many cases, and there's not an online booking system, is that right?
Correct, there's no online booking for halls.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, I think you've all asked your questions and got some clarity around the situation that we're dealing with. If there's any other feedback you might like to give around in the short term about what we need to be thinking about with regards to maintenance and that kind of thing, now's the time to do it. But if there are no further feedback or questions, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to reflect on what you've just said regarding the booking system. That, to me, is crazy. We've got a very high-powered, so we're told, system now that we should be utilising to control this ourselves. And then there's no, if you don't pay, you don't get access. Because at the moment, there's a lot of potential for things to fall through the cracks, and there could be money that we're actually missing. I'm not insinuating anything, I'm just saying that going forward we need a better process.
Thank you, Councillor. That's a big responsibility for community members too, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very briefly, the reason we're sitting around this table from different departments of the Council at the moment is actually we're trying to harmonise how we manage these community facilities, our financial systems integrated into this, our community engagement team liaises with the community, whether it's fair, a local committee, to manage these facilities. These are things, they're significant issues to manage. I want to close off by just reiterating, we do have a significant portfolio of property and facilities. We're still undertaking our revaluation of these facilities. They'll be roughly in the $500 million mark, on top of our $2.5 billion mark of other infrastructure components. Elected members should expect that we will cluster those facilities into 3 or 4 categories. There are facilities like the Event Centre, the Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre, the Aquatic Centres. These are iconic facilities, and they generate revenue for the economy and so on. Then we do have facilities and property that reflect, that assist other services, public toilets, for example. We've got housing of pump stations. You've got pavilions in our reserves and so on. These need to be clustered together because they are enabling other kind of services to be done. Then also, obviously, we've got items like these community halls, that they are really strictly dedicated to community interaction. But also, we've got facilities that and properties that there may be no valid historical reason why we retain these facilities and these properties, which needs to come back to elected members to decide whether. And as Councillor Brown said, well, maybe the land is too big, or what we need, can we subdivide it? We've got some facilities that are worth $3 or $4 million replacement value, but they generate an income of about $100 a year. So these are questions we need to put forward through a strategic facilities management plan so we can make some rational decisions and informed decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Stavros, and I think CE's got something to say as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through you, just wanted to say a final comment was, we're bringing you this information so that you have as much information as possible as soon as we have it. And so it can be, we can be as transparent about the things that are going well, but obviously the things that aren't, so that we can start framing for you develop some solutions for you and get some direction about, about how much effort you want to put into addressing some of these. Halls are a part of it, as I've said, and more broadly is the very large scale of non-infrastructure assets that we have that will be a major theme of the next long-term plan, because there are broad conversations that we need to have with the community about their aspirations, but also for us to be able to gather the information of, well, how did we get here historically? Were there some reasons why things were set up the way they have? And those, the current situation has outlasted those reasons, so there's some valid reasons to make some changes. So again, just wanted to say, we're not here to say this is here and it's all good and it's carrying on this way, but just to give you this information as soon as we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I just want to say thank you to Samantha and the property team for the body of work that you've done across the halls so far, and also to Kellyanne and your team for engaging so positively with those communities that were affected by the closures. I think connecting with them and understanding their concerns is helpful in this picture as well, and it's obviously going to be a space where we need to do a bit more of that going forward. Great to hear the lay of the land, although probably not particularly positive for some of the communities, although they will get some comfort knowing that in the short term there's going to be an effort to mitigate some of the immediate issues. Longer term, as CE and Stavros has said, there's obviously a larger body of work that's going to be worked on the facilities management and strategy, which is really encouraging and is well overdue, in my opinion. So great work. Thank you very much for your reports, and thank you for your time today. Thank you, everybody.